What if the most powerful secrets of your subconscious mind were not discovered in the 20th century, but were actually written down in sacred scrolls 3,000 years ago, preserved in a land that most of the world forgot, waiting for you to uncover them at this precise moment in your life? Pause and consider this truth. In the highlands of ancient Ethiopia, nestled within monastery walls carved into mountainsides, there exists a Bible unlike any you have ever known. It is older, more complete, and contains books that were deliberately removed from the scriptures you were given. Within these forgotten pages lie teachings about the creative power of the inner mind, the law of assumption, and the divine mechanism by which thought becomes reality. The ancient Ethiopian sages understood what modern seekers are only beginning to remember, that the kingdom of infinite supply exists within you, that your deeper mind is the connecting link between you and the source of all abundance, and that the feelings you cultivate in the secret chamber of your heart must inevitably take form in the outer world of your experience. This is not mysticism without foundation. This is not speculation without evidence. This is the rediscovery of a wisdom so ancient and so powerful that its guardians have protected it for millennia, passing it down through generations of priests and scribes who understood that these teachings would one day find their way to those who are ready to receive them. You are ready now. The very fact that you have been guided to this moment is no accident. Your subconscious mind, which knows all things and is connected to the infinite wisdom of creation, has led you here because there is something within this teaching that your soul requires for its next expansion. If this message resonates with the deepest part of your being, I invite you to subscribe to this channel now, for you have found a sanctuary of wisdom that will continue to nourish your spirit and transform your understanding of prosperity. Press the like button as a sacred act of faith, declaring to your subconscious mind that you are open and receptive to abundance. And in the comments below, write these words, "Ancient wisdom flows through me now." As you type these words, feel their truth vibrating in every cell of your being. Now let us begin this journey into the forgotten scriptures and the eternal laws of mind they contain. There is a land where Christianity took root before it reached Rome, before it spread through Europe, before the Western world had any knowledge of the teachings that would eventually shape its civilization. This land is Ethiopia, and within its ancient churches and hidden monasteries there exists a collection of sacred writings that the rest of the world has largely overlooked. The Ethiopian Bible contains 81 books, compared to the 66 found in most Protestant Bibles, and within these additional texts lie treasures of spiritual understanding that speak directly to the creative power of the inner mind. When you begin to study these ancient Ethiopian scriptures with the eyes of understanding, you discover something remarkable. These sages of antiquity knew that human beings possess two aspects of mind, one that operates on the surface of awareness and another that dwells in the depths, connected to the infinite source of all creation. They understood that this deeper aspect of mind responds not to mere words but to the emotional conviction behind those words. They taught that what a person holds in their heart with feeling and faith must inevitably manifest in their experience, for this is the law by which the universe operates. Consider the Book of Enoch, preserved in its complete form only within the Ethiopian biblical tradition while the rest of the world possessed merely fragments. This ancient text speaks of the Watchers, beings of immense power who observe the thoughts and intentions of humanity. When you understand this symbolically, you recognize a profound teaching about the subconscious mind itself. There is a watcher within you that never sleeps, that observes every thought you think, every belief you hold, every feeling you entertain. This inner watcher does not judge your thoughts as good or bad, right or wrong. It simply accepts them and begins the process of bringing them into manifestation. The Ethiopian sages knew that a person could speak words of prosperity while harboring feelings of poverty, and that the inner watcher would respond not to the words but to the dominant feeling. They understood that true transformation requires the alignment of conscious declaration with subconscious acceptance, and that this alignment occurs through the cultivation of feeling, through imagining the desired condition so vividly that it produces the same emotional response you would experience if it were already true. This is why the ancient Book of Jubilees, another text preserved in the Ethiopian tradition, places such emphasis on the inner life of the patriarchs. These were not merely historical figures to the Ethiopian scribes, they were exemplars of the law of mind in action. When you read of Abraham being called to leave his father's land and journey to a place he had never seen, you are reading about the journey every soul must take from the limitations of inherited beliefs to the promised land of expanded consciousness. Abraham believed before he saw. He felt the reality of the promise before any evidence appeared. And this, according to the ancient teaching, is the secret of manifestation. Let me share with you the experience of a man I shall call Solomon, though that was not his given name. Solomon was a merchant in a small coastal town, and for many years his business had barely provided for his family. He worked long hours, he prayed fervently, he recited affirmations of prosperity that he had learned from various teachers. Yet his circumstances remained unchanged, and gradually a deep discouragement settled over his heart. One evening, Solomon encountered an elderly teacher who asked him a simple question: "When you speak your words of abundance, what do you feel inside?" Solomon considered this carefully and admitted that even as he spoke of wealth and provision, there was a tight knot of fear in his stomach, a persistent feeling that the words were not true, that he was somehow deceiving himself. The teacher smiled gently and said, "You have discovered the very reason your demonstrations have not come. The inner watcher responds to the feeling, not the words. Your lips say wealth, but your heart says poverty. Your tongue speaks abundance, but your emotions radiate lack. You must learn to feel yourself wealthy before wealth can manifest. You must assume the consciousness of prosperity and remain faithful to that assumption until it hardens into fact." Solomon asked how this was possible when all the evidence of his senses proclaimed limitation. The teacher directed him to a practice that aligned with the most ancient Ethiopian wisdom, the practice of pre-sleep impression. Each night, just before drifting into slumber, when the conscious mind relaxes its grip and the subconscious becomes highly receptive, Solomon was to construct a simple mental scene that would imply the fulfillment of his desire. He was to see himself depositing a large sum into his bank account, to feel the texture of the deposit slip, to experience the satisfaction and gratitude that would naturally accompany such an event. He was to repeat this mental scene until it felt completely natural, until it produced a genuine emotional response. Solomon followed this instruction faithfully. At first, nothing seemed to change in his outer world. The same customers came to his shop. The same modest transactions occurred. But Solomon noticed a shift within himself. The anxiety that had been his constant companion began to dissolve. A quiet confidence took its place. He found himself conducting his business from a state of relaxed expectation rather than desperate striving. Within 3 months, an opportunity presented itself that Solomon could never have anticipated through conscious planning alone. A foreign trading company was seeking a local partner for a new venture, and through a series of circumstances that appeared entirely coincidental, Solomon was introduced to their representative. The partnership that formed multiplied his income beyond anything he had previously imagined possible. Now, the skeptic might say this was merely chance, that Solomon would have encountered this opportunity regardless of his mental practices. But those who understand the law of mind know better. The subconscious mind, once impressed with a belief accepted as true, begins to work through channels beyond the scope of conscious reasoning. It arranges circumstances, attracts opportunities, guides its possessor toward the fulfillment of the accepted belief through means that the conscious mind could never have devised. This is precisely what the ancient Ethiopian texts understood. In the Book of Wisdom, preserved within the Ethiopian canon, we find teachings about the relationship between the human mind and the divine creative power. The sages taught that human beings are not separate from the source of all creation but are expressions of it, individualized points through which the infinite thinks, feels, and creates. When you understand this principle, you recognize that the power to transform your financial circumstances is not something you must acquire from outside yourself, it is something you must uncover within yourself, for it has always been there. The prophet Isaiah, whose writings hold a place of reverence in the Ethiopian tradition, declared, "I will go before thee, and make the crooked places straight. I will break in pieces the gates of brass, and cut in sunder the bars of iron, and I will give thee the treasures of darkness and hidden riches of secret places." These are not merely poetic metaphors. They are precise descriptions of how the subconscious mind operates when properly directed by faith. The treasures of darkness refer to the wealth of creative power that lies hidden in the subconscious depths, in that part of mind that operates below the threshold of conscious awareness. The hidden riches of secret places are the solutions, opportunities, and resources that exist in the invisible realm of mind before they take form in the visible realm of experience. The infinite intelligence within you knows where these treasures are hidden and knows precisely how to bring them into your life, but it responds only to the law of belief, only to the assumption accepted as true, only to the feeling that persists despite outer appearances. The Ethiopian Church has maintained for centuries the practice of contemplative prayer, in which the worshipper moves beyond words into a state of pure feeling, a direct communion with the divine presence within. This practice aligns perfectly with the principle of subconscious impression. When you move beyond the chatter of the conscious mind, beyond the arguments and doubts and logical objections, you enter a state in which the subconscious becomes fully receptive to whatever thought is held with feeling and faith. Consider another experience that illustrates this principle. A woman named Miriam, and again, this is not her actual name, found herself in desperate circumstances after the death of her husband. He had left her with significant debts and no apparent means of income. Her relatives urged her to sell the family home and move into a smaller dwelling, to accept her reduced circumstances as permanent. But something within Miriam refused to accept this as the final word on her situation. She remembered a teaching she had received many years before about the creative power of the inner mind. She began to practice what the ancient Ethiopian contemplatives knew, the art of dwelling in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Each morning upon waking, and each evening before sleeping, she would imagine herself in a state of complete financial security. She did not know how this would come about. She did not try to figure out the means. She simply held the feeling, the deep satisfaction of knowing that all her needs were met, that her debts were paid, that she lacked nothing. Miriam continued this practice for 4 months without any visible change in her circumstances. Her relatives grew impatient. Some suggested she was being foolish, living in fantasy rather than facing reality. But Miriam understood something they did not, that the feeling of the wish fulfilled is not fantasy but faith, not escapism but the creative act by which the subconscious mind is impressed with a new pattern. In the 5th month, Miriam received a letter from a solicitor informing her that a distant relative she had never met had passed away and left her a substantial inheritance. The amount was sufficient not only to clear all her debts but to provide her with income for the rest of her life. Those who did not understand the law called it coincidence. Those who knew the law recognized it as the inevitable consequence of sustained belief. This is what the Ethiopian Book of Enoch calls the operation of divine justice, not punishment and reward as commonly understood, but the immutable law by which consciousness manifests according to its own nature. Plant thoughts of poverty and you harvest poverty. Plant thoughts of abundance and you harvest abundance. The law operates with mathematical precision, and it makes no exceptions. The beautiful Psalm 23, beloved in the Ethiopian tradition as in all Christian traditions, contains a complete teaching on prosperity consciousness. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. This is not merely a statement of religious belief, it is a declaration of the abundance that belongs to every soul that recognizes its connection to the infinite source. When you truly understand that the creative power of the universe is working on your behalf, that the same intelligence that guides the stars in their courses is guiding your life toward fulfillment, how can you want for anything? He maketh me to lie down in green pastures, he leadeth me beside the still waters. Green pastures represent abundance, fertility, provision without effort. Still waters represent the calm, peaceful state of mind that must precede demonstration. As long as your mind is troubled, as long as fear and doubt agitate the waters of consciousness, you cannot clearly perceive the guidance that is always available. But when you quiet the surface mind and rest in the assurance of infinite supply, you are led into experiences of abundance that exceed your conscious planning. The ancient Ethiopian liturgy includes prayers for prosperity that would surprise many modern believers who have been taught that spirituality and wealth are somehow opposed. The Ethiopian sages understood that poverty is not a virtue and that the Creator takes pleasure in the prosperity of those who understand and apply the law. The universe is not stingy. It is infinitely abundant. The only limitation is in the consciousness of the individual who has not yet learned to accept this abundance as their own. This brings us to a principle that the Ethiopian texts emphasize repeatedly, the principle of receiving. Many seekers understand the importance of asking, of visualizing, of impressing the subconscious with the desired state. But fewer understand that the ability to receive is equally essential. Your good is constantly flowing toward you. The infinite source is perpetually extending abundance in your direction. But if your consciousness is closed by feelings of unworthiness, by beliefs that you do not deserve, by subconscious patterns that reject prosperity, then the abundance cannot enter your experience. The master teacher said, "Ask, and it shall be given you, seek, and ye shall find, knock, and it shall be opened unto you." But he also said, "Freely ye have received, freely give." The ability to give is connected to the ability to receive, for both are expressions of the same understanding, that you are a channel through which the infinite flows, not a closed container that must protect its limited contents. A young man I shall call Thomas learned this principle under remarkable circumstances. Thomas had studied the laws of mind and practiced visualization techniques for manifesting prosperity. He had experienced some small demonstrations but nothing that truly transformed his circumstances. He came to understand that there was a blockage within him, something that prevented the full flow of abundance into his life. Through deep self-examination, Thomas discovered that he harbored a subconscious belief that wealthy people were somehow morally suspect, that money was connected with greed and corruption, that remaining relatively poor was actually a sign of spiritual superiority. These beliefs had been implanted in childhood through comments from relatives and impressions from his environment. He had never consciously adopted these beliefs, but they had taken root in his subconscious mind nonetheless, where they silently sabotaged every attempt at prosperity. When Thomas brought these beliefs into conscious awareness, he was able to examine them clearly for the first time. He recognized that wealth itself is neutral. It is simply a form of energy that can be used for good or ill depending on the consciousness of the one who possesses it. He realized that by remaining in poverty, He was not demonstrating any spiritual virtue but was simply manifesting his subconscious fear of abundance. He began the deliberate work of replacing these limiting beliefs with their prosperous opposites, using the technique of pre-sleep impression to install new patterns in his deeper mind. The transformation in Thomas's circumstances was gradual but unmistakable. New opportunities began to appear. His income increased steadily over the following year. But more importantly, his relationship with money changed. He no longer felt guilty about prosperity or anxious about accumulation. He understood that abundance is the natural state of the universe and that accepting it is not selfishness but alignment with the creative law. The Ethiopian Bible preserves a remarkable verse in the book of Sirach that speaks directly to this understanding. Do not deprive yourself of a day's enjoyment. Do not let your share of desired good pass by you. This is not an invitation to hedonism but a recognition that the Creator has intended abundance for all creatures and that refusing this abundance is a form of ingratitude, a rejection of the gift that is constantly being offered. The principle of assumption, which operates at the heart of all subconscious demonstration, was well understood by the ancient Ethiopian teachers. To assume is to take upon yourself the consciousness of that which you wish to experience. It is to think from the state of fulfillment rather than merely thinking about it. This distinction is crucial and is often missed by those who practice visualization without results. When you think about wealth, you are separated from it. You are here, looking at wealth over there, at a distance. But when you think from wealth, you have imaginatively placed yourself within the desired state. You are seeing your world through the eyes of one who is already prosperous. You are feeling, reacting, and responding as you would if abundance were already your normal experience. The Ethiopian monasteries preserve techniques for cultivating this state of assumption that parallel the practices taught by modern masters of the subconscious mind. The monks would enter into deep states of meditation and imaginatively participate in the reality they wished to see manifest. They understood that the imagination is not a mere faculty for escapism but is the creative power itself, the means by which the invisible is given form and the formless takes on substance. The Book of Jubilees teaches that before any creation occurs, it exists first in the divine mind as an image, a pattern, a template. This is true of cosmic creation and it is equally true of your individual creations. Before any condition can manifest in your life, it must first exist in your mind as an accepted belief, a dominant feeling, an assumption held with conviction. Your subconscious mind then takes this inner pattern and works through all necessary means to externalize it in your experience. This is why worry is so destructive, not merely because it feels unpleasant but because it is a form of negative creation. When you worry, you are imagining what you do not want. You are creating inner pictures of failure, lack, and disaster. You are impressing your subconscious with these images and feelings. And your faithful subconscious, which cannot distinguish between constructive imagination and destructive worry, goes to work to bring these negative patterns into manifestation. The Ethiopian saints taught the discipline of mental vigilance, the constant watching over the thoughts and feelings that flow through consciousness. This is not a practice of suppression or denial but of selective attention. You learn to notice when your mind drifts toward fear and lack, and you gently redirect it toward faith and abundance. You become the gardener of your own consciousness, choosing which thoughts to water and nurture and which to starve through inattention. As I bring this first portion of our teaching to a close, I want you to rest in a truth that has been known for 3,000 years in the mountains of Ethiopia and is now being revealed anew to all who have ears to hear. Within you, at this very moment, there exists a power of infinite capacity, a creative intelligence that knows no limitation, a source of abundance that can never be exhausted. This power is your subconscious mind, and it is connected to the same infinite presence that flung the stars across the heavens and brought all things into being. You are not a creature of circumstance. You are a creator of circumstance. The conditions that surround you are not causes, they are effects, the outpicturing of beliefs you have held in the past. As you change your beliefs, as you impress your subconscious with new assumptions of abundance and prosperity, the outer conditions must change accordingly, for they have no independent existence apart from the consciousness that creates them. The Ethiopian sages knew this. The ancient scrolls preserve this wisdom. And now, in this moment, this understanding is being transferred to you, not merely as intellectual information but as living truth that will transform every aspect of your financial experience if you receive it with faith and act upon it with conviction. There is more to share, deeper teachings to explore, additional principles to reveal. The second part of this transmission will carry you further into the ancient wisdom and show you specific methods for applying these truths to your daily life. The Ethiopian Bible contains treasures that most of the world has never seen, and these treasures are now being opened to you. The wisdom we have begun to explore together now deepens, for there are chambers within this ancient teaching that few have ever entered. The Ethiopian Bible, preserved through millennia of careful guardianship, contains not only the texts we have discussed but also entire books of practical instruction on the application of spiritual law to daily life. These books were removed from the Western canon centuries ago, but they remain alive and studied in the Ethiopian tradition, where generation after generation has learned that the principles of mind are not abstract philosophy but working tools for the transformation of human experience. Let us now penetrate further into these mysteries, for there is a teaching within the Ethiopian tradition that speaks directly to the mechanism by which the subconscious mind operates. The ancient scribes understood that the deeper mind works not through effort but through acceptance, not through struggle but through surrender, not through force but through feeling. This understanding is captured in a principle they called sacred receptivity, the art of opening the inner doors of consciousness to receive what the infinite is always offering. Many seekers fail in their demonstrations not because they lack sincerity, not because they fail to visualize correctly, not because they do not deserve prosperity, but because they do not know how to receive. They approach the infinite with clenched fists rather than open hands. They strain and strive and push, not realizing that this very effort creates a tension in consciousness that blocks the natural flow of abundance. The Book of Wisdom, treasured in the Ethiopian canon, teaches that divine provision flows like water. It seeks the lowest places, the empty spaces, the receptive vessels. When your consciousness is already filled with anxiety about how your needs will be met, there is no room for the answer to enter. When your mind is cluttered with plans and schemes for forcing your good to appear, you block the channels through which the infinite intelligence would naturally provide. The ancient Ethiopian masters taught their students to empty themselves of striving, to become like hollow reeds through which the breath of providence could flow unobstructed. This does not mean passive resignation. This does not mean abandoning all effort or sitting idle while expecting abundance to appear. The Ethiopian teaching is more subtle than this. It distinguishes between inspired action and anxious action, between movement that flows from inner guidance and movement that springs from outer fear. When you have truly impressed your subconscious mind with the belief of abundance, you will find yourself naturally taking actions that lead toward your good. These actions will not feel forced or desperate. They will feel right, aligned, inevitable. You will move with confidence rather than anxiety, knowing that you are cooperating with a power greater than your conscious mind. Let me illustrate this with the experience of a woman I shall call Hannah. She was a seamstress who had worked for many years in the shop of another, earning modest wages that barely covered her expenses. Hannah dreamed of opening her own establishment, of creating beautiful garments for those who appreciated fine craftsmanship. But the capital required seemed far beyond her reach, and she had resigned herself to remaining in her current position indefinitely. Hannah came upon the teachings of the subconscious mind through a chance conversation with a customer whose garment she was repairing. This customer spoke of the creative power within and of the Ethiopian spiritual tradition that emphasized the partnership between human consciousness and divine abundance. Hannah was intrigued enough to begin practicing what she learned. Each night, Hannah would relax her body completely, breathe slowly and deeply, and imagine herself standing in her own shop. She constructed every detail in her imagination: the shelves lined with bolts of fabric, the large cutting table in the center, the comfortable chairs where customers would sit as they discussed their desires. She did not merely see these things as pictures before her, she saw them from her own eyes as if she were actually present in this shop that existed in her imagination. She felt the satisfaction of ownership, the joy of creative independence, the gratitude for the fulfillment of her dream. For many weeks, nothing seemed to change in Hannah's outer circumstances. She continued working in the same shop, performing the same tasks, receiving the same wages. But she noticed a shift within herself. The hopelessness that had been her constant companion was replaced by a quiet expectancy. She began to take more care with her work, not from a sense of duty but from an inner joy that seemed to flow through her fingers. Her employer noticed the change and commented on the improved quality of her stitching. Then, unexpectedly, the owner of the shop fell ill and decided to retire. Rather than selling the business to a stranger, she approached Hannah with an offer that seemed almost miraculous. She would sell the shop to Hannah at a price well below market value, accepting payment over time from the profits of the business itself. No large initial capital was required. The very obstacle that had seemed insurmountable simply dissolved. This is how the subconscious mind works when properly impressed. It does not always bring the thing itself directly. Sometimes it removes the obstacles that stood between you and your desire. Sometimes it changes circumstances in ways you could never have anticipated. Sometimes it works through the decisions of others, through apparent coincidences, through a chain of events that only in retrospect can be seen as purposeful. The Ethiopian sages called this the hidden hand of providence, invisible but always active, always moving on behalf of those who trust in the law. The book of Proverbs, which holds a central place in the Ethiopian Bible as in all biblical traditions, contains a teaching that illuminates this principle: trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. To trust with all your heart means to trust with your feeling nature, not merely with your intellect. It means to rest in the deep conviction that there is a wisdom operating through your subconscious mind that knows the way to your good, even when your conscious mind cannot see the path. To lean not on your own understanding means to release the need to figure out exactly how your demonstration will come. This is where many seekers stumble. They impress their subconscious with the desired end, but then they begin to worry about the means. They try to manipulate circumstances with their conscious mind. They decide that their good must come through a particular channel, and if that channel appears blocked, they fall into despair. But the infinite intelligence has access to millions of channels unknown to the conscious mind. When you release the need to control the how and trust completely in the what, you allow the subconscious to work through whatever means are most efficient. The Ethiopian tradition includes extensive teachings on the law of assumption, though they used different language to describe it. They spoke of putting on the garment of the desired state, of clothing oneself in the consciousness of that which one wished to become. This imagery is powerful because it suggests something you do deliberately, something you can choose at any moment. Just as you select garments from your wardrobe and put them on, so you can select states of consciousness and assume them, wearing them until they become natural to you. When you assume the consciousness of wealth, you are not pretending or engaging in self-deception. You are operating the law as it was designed to function. The assumption, held with persistence and feeling, impresses the subconscious mind. The subconscious accepts this impression as true and immediately begins the work of expressing it in your external circumstances. The time lag between inner assumption and outer manifestation varies according to the intensity of your belief and the absence of contradictory assumptions, but the manifestation is inevitable if the assumption is maintained. Consider the case of a man I shall call Marcus. He worked as a bookkeeper for a small trading company, a position that provided security but offered little opportunity for advancement. Marcus felt trapped in circumstances that did not reflect his inner sense of potential. He knew he was capable of more, but he did not know how to break free from the limitations that surrounded him. Marcus learned of the law of assumption and began to practice it with diligence. He would spend 20 minutes each day in a state of deep relaxation, assuming the consciousness of being a prosperous and respected business leader. He did not visualize specific scenes but rather cultivated the feeling of success, the inner posture of confidence, the settled assurance of one who has achieved significant financial standing. He asked himself how he would feel if he were already the person he wished to become, and then he deliberately produced that feeling and dwelt in it. The first change Marcus noticed was internal. He began to carry himself differently. His voice took on new authority. His colleagues noticed that he seemed more confident, more at ease with himself. His employer began to consult him on matters beyond his usual responsibilities. Within a year, Marcus was offered a partnership in the company, something that would have been unthinkable when he began his practice. Within 3 years, he had established his own enterprise, which grew into one of the most successful trading operations in his region. Now, Marcus did not sit idle while waiting for these changes to occur. He worked diligently. He improved his skills. He studied the practices of successful businessmen. But all of this action flowed naturally from the inner change that had already occurred. He was not forcing himself to act successful. He was acting from the genuine consciousness of success that he had assumed and maintained until it became natural. The outer transformation was the inevitable expression of the inner reality. This is the great secret that the Ethiopian scriptures preserve. The inner always precedes and determines the outer. This teaching runs throughout the biblical tradition but has been especially emphasized in the Ethiopian understanding. The book of Sirach declares that before a thing comes into being in the visible realm, it already exists in the invisible realm of mind. Creation follows consciousness. Form follows idea. Experience follows belief. The master teacher spoke of this when he said, "For verily I say unto you, that whosoever shall say unto this mountain, Be thou removed, and be thou cast into the sea, and shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe that those things which he saith shall come to pass, he shall have whatsoever he saith." Notice the precision of this teaching. The belief must be in the heart, not merely in the head. The heart, in biblical symbolism, represents the subconscious mind, the feeling nature, the deep seat of conviction. And there must be no doubt. Doubt is the countercurrent that neutralizes the power of belief. Doubt is the contradiction that cancels the impression. When the heart is undivided, when the deep mind accepts without question, the manifestation must follow. The practice of pre-sleep impression, which we touched upon earlier, deserves further elaboration, for it is one of the most powerful techniques for impressing the subconscious mind that the ancient traditions have preserved. The Ethiopian monasteries developed sophisticated practices of evening meditation in which the monks would deliberately choose the thoughts and feelings with which they would enter sleep. They understood that the transition from waking to sleeping is a period of heightened suggestibility, a time when the critical faculty of the conscious mind relaxes and the subconscious becomes unusually receptive. What you think and feel in these final moments before sleep sinks deeply into your subconscious and begins to work during the night hours, when your conscious mind is completely inactive. Many people waste this precious opportunity by reviewing their worries, rehearsing their fears, dwelling on their problems. They impress their subconscious with these negative patterns and then wonder why their circumstances do not improve. The Ethiopian practice instructs differently. In the evening, before retiring, spend a few moments in quietude. Release the concerns of the day. Forgive yourself for any perceived failures and forgive others for any perceived offenses. Enter a state of peace and gratitude. Then, with full attention and feeling, construct a simple scene that implies the fulfillment of your desire. See it from your own eyes, not as a detached observer. Feel the reality of it. Let the emotion of satisfaction and gratitude rise naturally within you. Hold this scene, repeating it gently if your mind wanders, until you feel a sense of completion, a knowing that it is done. Then drift into sleep with this feeling as your last conscious experience. This practice, performed consistently over time, works changes in the subconscious that will amaze you. The Ethiopian monks reported that dreams themselves would begin to change, becoming more positive and expansive. They found that upon waking they would feel lighter, more confident, more certain that their good was on its way. And in the outer world, circumstances would begin to shift in the direction of the assumed state. There is another principle the Ethiopian Bible emphasizes that is essential for successful demonstration, the principle of non-resistance. The master teacher expressed this when he said, "Resist not evil." This has been interpreted in many ways, but from the perspective of subconscious mind science, it contains a profound practical truth. What you resist persists. What you fight you strengthen. When you push against unwanted conditions with anxiety and desperation, you actually give them more power over you. The Ethiopian sages taught that unwanted circumstances should be met not with resistance but with transcendence. You do not deny the apparent reality of lack, you simply refuse to accept it as permanent or as having any power over your deeper self. You acknowledge it as the manifestation of previous beliefs while simultaneously knowing that it is dissolving as new beliefs take hold. This attitude of calm confidence, of non-resistant awareness, prevents you from reinforcing the very conditions you wish to change. A merchant I shall call Ezra discovered this principle during a period of severe financial difficulty. His business had declined due to circumstances beyond his control, and he found himself unable to meet his obligations. He fell into a state of desperate resistance, fighting against his circumstances with every ounce of his energy. But the harder he fought, the worse things seemed to become. His resistance was not solving the problem, it was exhausting him and making clear thinking impossible. Then Ezra remembered a teaching he had heard about the power of acceptance. He decided to try a different approach. Instead of resisting his circumstances, he simply accepted them as they were in the present moment while refusing to believe they represented his permanent condition. He stopped fighting and began relaxing. He acknowledged his current situation without agreeing that it had power over his future. He let go of the tension that had been gripping him and opened himself to guidance from within. In this state of relaxed acceptance, something shifted. Ideas began to come to Ezra that had not occurred to him before. He saw possibilities for restructuring his business that had been invisible when his mind was clouded with fear. He received unexpected help from sources he would never have approached in his state of proud resistance. Within 2 years, his business had not only recovered but had grown larger than before the difficulty began. This is the paradox of non-resistance. By ceasing to fight, you release the energy that was bound up in struggle and make it available for constructive creation. The Ethiopian teaching compares this to a man trying to escape from quicksand. The more he struggles, the deeper he sinks. But if he relaxes and spreads his body wide, he floats to the surface and can gradually work his way to solid ground. So it is with financial difficulty. Resistance sinks you deeper. Relaxed faith lifts you up. The book of Philippians, treasured in the Ethiopian tradition, offers this assurance, "But my God shall supply all your need according to his riches in glory by Christ Jesus." Notice that it says all your need, not some, not most, but all. And notice the source of supply, not according to your limited resources, not according to economic conditions, not according to what seems possible to the rational mind, but according to infinite riches in glory. When you connect with the infinite through your subconscious mind, you tap into a supply that knows no limitation. The Ethiopian understanding of this verse is profound. They teach that Christ Jesus is not merely a historical figure but represents the divine pattern within every human being, the image and likeness of the infinite in which all were created. When you align with this pattern, when you allow it to express through you, you become a channel for abundance that far exceeds what your personal efforts could ever produce. You are no longer limited to what you can earn or acquire through human means alone. You become a recipient of divine provision that flows through whatever channels the infinite wisdom selects. This teaching raises an important point about the relationship between effort and grace. Some interpret teachings about the subconscious mind as suggesting that no effort is required, that one simply imagines and waits for abundance to appear. But this is a misunderstanding. The Ethiopian tradition emphasizes the partnership between divine grace and human cooperation. Grace provides the power, the wisdom, the opportunity. Human cooperation receives, directs, and acts upon what grace provides. When your subconscious is properly impressed with the belief of abundance, you will find yourself naturally moved to action. But this action will not feel like struggle. It will feel like flow. You will be guided to do the right thing at the right time. Doors will open as you approach them. Resources will appear as you need them. This is the experience of those who understand and apply the law. A woman I shall call Ruth knew nothing of these principles until she encountered them during a period of transition in her life. Her husband had passed away, her children had grown and established their own homes, and she found herself alone with modest resources and uncertain about her future. Rather than falling into despair, Ruth was introduced to the teaching of the subconscious mind by a book that seemed to come to her by chance. She began to practice the principles with simple faith. Each day she gave thanks for the abundance that was hers, even though she could not yet see it. Each night she fell asleep in the feeling of financial security and divine provision. She did not know what form her good would take, but she trusted that the infinite intelligence knew and would guide her accordingly. Ruth felt moved to volunteer at a local charitable organization, not from any strategic motive but simply because it felt right. There she met a businessman who was looking for someone to manage a small property he owned. The position paid well and included housing. Ruth felt no hesitation in accepting, knowing that this was the guidance she had been promised. The position led to other opportunities, each one arriving at precisely the right moment, each one contributing to a financial security greater than she had ever known during her married life. This is how the law operates for those who trust it completely. You do not need to see the entire path before you take the first step. You need only to believe that the path exists and that you will be guided along it. Each step reveals the next. Each demonstration strengthens your faith for the one to follow. Over time, you develop an unshakable conviction in the law because you have witnessed its operation too many times to doubt it. The Ethiopian Bible preserves teachings about the necessity of persistence in applying these principles. The Book of Sirach advises that the one who seeks wisdom must be prepared to wait for it, to undergo testing, to remain faithful when immediate results do not appear. This is not because the law is slow or unreliable, but because the human consciousness often requires time to fully accept a new belief. When you begin to practice these principles, you may find that nothing seems to change at first. This is a testing period. Your subconscious is evaluating whether you truly believe or are merely experimenting. If you become discouraged and abandon the practice at the first sign of difficulty, you demonstrate that your belief was superficial. But if you persist, if you maintain your assumption in spite of appearances, if you continue to feel the reality of your desire even when the senses report contradiction, you pass the test. Your subconscious accepts that you are serious, that this belief is to be acted upon, and the manifestation begins to unfold. The Ethiopian monasteries speak of this persistence as a spiritual discipline, as essential as prayer or fasting. The monk who wishes to attain spiritual heights must persist through periods of dryness when the presence of the divine seems distant. The seeker of prosperity must persist through periods when abundance seems impossible. In both cases, it is the persistence itself that works the necessary change in consciousness, for persistence demonstrates faith, and faith is the currency by which the subconscious operates. The prophet Isaiah, whose writings are revered in the Ethiopian tradition, offers this encouragement, "But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength, they shall mount up with wings as eagles, they shall run, and not be weary, and they shall walk, and not faint." To wait upon the Lord means to maintain confident expectation while allowing the infinite wisdom to work through its own channels and timing. It does not mean passive idleness but active faith. And to those who wait in this manner, strength is renewed, limitations are transcended, and the impossible becomes possible. As we approach the conclusion of this transmission, I want to speak to you directly about what you are capable of experiencing as a result of applying these ancient principles. You have within you at this moment every capacity needed for complete financial transformation. The Ethiopian sages knew this 3,000 years ago. The sacred scrolls they preserved contain this teaching for all who have the understanding to receive it. And you have been guided to this teaching because you are ready for it. The subconscious mind that dwells within you is not a thing apart from the infinite intelligence that governs the universe. It is a direct expression of that intelligence, individualized in you, operating according to eternal law. When you impress this deeper mind with beliefs of abundance, with feelings of prosperity, with assumptions of wealth, you are not trying to manipulate the universe, you are aligning with its fundamental nature. Abundance is the truth of existence. Limitation is the illusion created by human belief. As you change your beliefs, the illusion dissolves and the truth reveals itself in your experience. This teaching has been hidden in the Ethiopian highlands, protected through centuries of isolation, waiting for the time when humanity would be ready to receive it on a wider scale. That time is now. The wisdom that was once available only to initiates and monks is now being offered openly to all who seek it. You are part of a great awakening of human consciousness to its own creative power. Do not take these principles lightly. They are not mere interesting ideas to be considered and set aside. They are living truths that will transform your life if you apply them with seriousness and consistency. Begin tonight with the practice of pre-sleep impression. Choose one clear goal related to your financial life and construct a simple scene that implies its fulfillment. Enter that scene with feeling. Repeat it until you feel the satisfaction of accomplishment. Then fall asleep in that feeling. Do this every night for at least 30 days without interruption, and observe what changes in your circumstances. The Ethiopian Bible teaches that the Creator formed human beings in the divine image and breathed into them the breath of life. You carry within you the very creative power of the infinite. The same capacity by which worlds were formed operates through your consciousness. This is not metaphor or exaggeration, it is the literal truth of your nature, preserved in ancient scripture, confirmed by modern understanding, and available for you to demonstrate in your own experience. Let the words of Luke's Gospel be your assurance, "Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom." The kingdom of abundance is not something you must earn or deserve or struggle to obtain. It is something the infinite desires to give you. Your only task is to remove the barriers of doubt and fear that have prevented you from receiving it. And you now possess the knowledge to remove those barriers. The Ethiopian tradition closes its sacred services with blessings of abundance and prosperity, prayers for the welfare of all beings, and gratitude for the infinite provision that sustains all life. In this spirit, I offer you these final words. The teachings you have received in this transmission are offered for your education and inspiration. They represent original reflections on the ancient principles of subconscious mind science as preserved in various spiritual traditions. As with all wisdom teachings, their value is realized only through personal application. You are encouraged to take what resonates with your spirit, to test these principles in your own experience, and to exercise your own judgment in all matters relating to your financial life. Inspired action, guided by inner wisdom, combined with practical prudence, creates the conditions for lasting prosperity. May the infinite intelligence that knows all things guide you in every decision. May the creative power of your subconscious mind bring forth into manifestation every good thing you desire. May you walk in the consciousness of abundance, speak the language of prosperity, and feel the reality of wealth that is your divine inheritance. The ancient wisdom of the Ethiopian Bible is now planted within you. Water it with faith. Nurture it with feeling. And watch as it blossoms into the prosperous life you were created to live. You are blessed. You are abundant. You are one with the infinite source of all supply. Go forward now in complete confidence, knowing that the law is working on your behalf, that your good is moving toward you, and that nothing can prevent the fulfillment of that which you have accepted as true in the depths of your heart. And so it is.